Welcome back, Heat Seekers. Week 3 is nearly in the books, and as always, I hope it treated you a lot better than it treated my Detroit Lions. This time, we're helping you get ready for Week 4 with the waiver wire pickups that you need to think about.
Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
All right, so starting us off at number 12, who do we got, Mr. Sullivan?
We started off with A.J. Green of the Arizona Cardinals. Not the sexiest pick out there. It's a bit of a weird week, waiver wire-wise, in general. But, Green was involved for the second week in a row. We scored a touchdown last week. He had 5-6 catches today. It went over 100 yards receiving. Definitely someone that could find his way onto your bench and perhaps into your starting lineup with all the injuries that we saw this week.
Yeah, we saw DeAndre on the field, but it wasn't typical DeAndre fashion. And, for the better part of a game, Jacksonville was hanging in there tough with them. So it was interesting for sure. All right, who's number 11?
Number 11 is Giovani Bernard of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, not the sexiest thing in the world, but a running back that has some fantasy relevance, especially in the passing game. In a negative game script for Tampa today, they threw the ball significantly to Giovani Bernard, and as expected, he did well. What did he do? 10 targets, 9 catches, 51 yards, and he scored. So if you can get close to that every week, that's a starting running back for you that you can grab pretty much anywhere. You see the ownership there is pretty widely available.
Well, and Leonard and Ronald Jones are not doing anything to separate themselves from Gio.
Not
so
at
Gio
all.
could be a guy that you could sneak now onto your roster, and they use him more and more as the season goes on because he's trustworthy over his career. They just don't use him very often in the last few years in Cincy. So good choice. Who do we got at number 10?
Going back to the Arizona Cardinals and another wide receiver and back to Christian Kirk. So Christian Kirk kind of does that roller coaster thing for us. And I think that's why his ownership percentage is what it is. He had another good game today. He was 7 catches, 104 yards. Again, Hopkins was a little bit slowed today due to whatever. I think it's an ankle. I'm not exactly sure what it is. But Christian Kirk is a viable piece of that offense. And Arizona is one of those offenses with Kyler Murray at quarterback that I want a piece of. And if that piece is going to be Christian Kirk, I'm happy to do that.
And the tough thing is Rondale Moore was the unbeneficiary of all this lack of attention. So DeAndre had a tough game, but Rondale was just as much. And he was a guy that a lot of us fantasy sites, all the fantasy sites were talking, pick him up, use him. Well, if you picked him up, put him in your lineup, he killed you. I mean, that's a rough week.
I think he's still worth rostering, though. Like if he wasn't picked up, I might still consider picking him up, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And so just be careful out there, folks. It's dangerous when you've got such a high-powered offense that has so many talented weapons. It really, you get into these kind of back-and-forth matchups. Who's going to get the targets? Who's going to get the attention? So it's tough, but, these guys are all talented, and they're all worth rostering. Who do we got at number 9?
Number 9, Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver. Nope, I'm one ahead. I'm sorry. Alexander Mattison of my Minnesota Vikings. I'm so surprised that they won. I don't know what's going on anymore. Mattison looked fantastic today. And if Dalvin Cook is to miss any more time with this ankle injury, he's an absolute must-start running back. And even when Dalvin comes back, I think Alexander Mattison did enough to gain a little bit more workload in that backfield. So he could be a flex guy going forward. He's fairly well rostered in both Yahoo and Sleeper leagues, but ESPN fantasy managers, go get him.
Yeah, and if Cook sees any extended absence, he's very usable. Very usable. All right, so now let's get to your number 8. Number 9.
So my name's Rob Sullivan, and I was wrong about Bryan Edwards. I've been kind of dogging him for the better part of a year and a bit. But it seems like Bryan Edwards is involved in the Raiders offense. And what I like the most is he's involved when it matters the most. In the late goings and in the tight games, Carr's looking for him, and he's making plays over the middle. So I think Bryan Edwards has the ability to be a flex-type asset on your fantasy roster. And the Raiders are another one of those offenses that I want a part of. They're putting up points, and they're moving the football. So that's an offense I want a piece of. Yeah,
they've really turned it around. And Edwards is a bigger target, which is what they were looking for. And they needed a guy who could be involved in some of the deeper stuff, some of the red zone stuff, and be that bigger catch radius. So not a terrible pickup. He's been getting targeted more and more recently. Last week had a touchdown called back. This week, was like 3 for 50 something. I mean, there's
59. Yeah,
59. So a fair amount of involvement in that offense is a good showing, especially moving forward with all these injuries that we've been seeing. It can be certainly a helpful piece of your fantasy team.
Yeah.
What are we doing at number 7?
Number 7, we have Sony Michel, running back of the Los Angeles Rams. Not the greatest game today, but not a game that we really expected him to be that great in. Going up against that Tampa Bay defense, run defense is elite, and it's tough to run again. But he had 20 carries, 67 yards. And what I really like from Sony is he was targeted 4 times, which we never really saw in New England. He hauled in 3 of them. So 23 touches. I think he's slowly starting to gain a little bit of a share of that lead back role in Los Angeles. And we don't know how long Henderson's going to be out. But when he comes back, I think Sony is the guy to have going forward.
Yeah, rib injuries are always tough, but it's a good sign that the team trusts him, that Stafford trusts him when he's looking for somebody to check down to. It was a very good situation today against a tough defense. And there's a few more of those on the docket. I mean, LA's got some tough competition in the division there. And so great pickup. What do we got at 6?
Hunter Renfrow, back to the Raiders again. Interesting, right? Like he's usually that guy that's like 3 or 4 catches for 40 yards. That's his floor. And he seems to do that every week. This week he got up to 77 yards and he did something he doesn't normally do. And he scored a touchdown. So he's another one of those guys that Carr is looking for. If he doesn't have Waller, he looks for Renfrow. And if he doesn't have Renfrow, then he looks for Edwards. That seems to be his progression. So I think Hunter Renfrow, again, in an offense that's moving the football and scoring points, is worthy of a roster spot.
Yeah, and it's important to mention that the touchdowns aren't the regulars. So if you looked at the stat line this week and got excited, don't expect that every week. This is a PPR specific type ad where you're going to get more value out of them there. But if you're in a pinch in other formats, that could also be helpful as well. But know that he's not normally going to get you all that touchdown upside.
Yeah.
Speaking of touchdown upside, a guy that had tons of touchdown upside. Who are we talking about next?
I was going to say, speaking of somebody who you shouldn't plan on scoring every week, Emmanuel Sanders of the Buffalo Bills had a nice week. 5 grabs on 6 targets, almost 100 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. So no, I don't expect him to score every week, and I certainly don't expect him to score multiple times every week. But what I liked here today is Josh Allen got back to being Josh Allen, and Emmanuel Sanders is the number 2 receiver in that offense down the field. In the intermediate part, I think it's still Cole Beasley, but when Allen's looking downfield, I think it's Emmanuel Sanders. And again, it's an offense that's going to score points. They put up a boatload today on a good Washington defense. I think that Emmanuel Sanders has at least back of your roster flex, depending upon matchup type relevance, and he should be rostered in more leagues than he is.
Yeah. Cole Beasley definitely got targeted a ton, and unfortunately, Devin Singletary didn't. That was another one that killed me this week. My Singletary shares did very little in return.
I got talked out of Singletary early this morning, and I'm thankful to Bryce and Rick for that one.
All right, who's number 4 on our list?
Tim Patrick just keeps on going. He just seems to need opportunity, and he had another good game. He surprisingly didn't score. I think he's scored in 8 of the Broncos' last 10 games. But they didn't really need to do a whole lot. Denver didn't. But what did he do? 5 catches, 98 yards. Teddy likes him. He's comfortable and he's safe. So he's a back-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, definitely worthy of a flex, and should be rostered in a heck of a lot more than the percentages you see there.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an interesting play. And once Judy comes back, obviously that will cause some drop off for a guy like Patrick, but we don't know exactly when Judy's really going to be back from the injury. If it isn't half season or more, who knows? Yeah.
And one little thing too, is I saw KJ Hamler left this one early. I don't know the severity of that. So if Hamler's out as well, then even if Judy gets back, he's probably still going to be on the field the majority of the time in 3 wide receiver sets.
Absolutely. All right. Coming in at number 3, who do we got?
Cordarrelle Patterson, the wide receiver turned running back turned wide receiver. I don't know. He's relevant again, and he's getting a lot of touches in Atlanta coming out of the backfield, and he did a nice job today catching the football in what was a really weird game against the Giants. I expected there to be a significantly large amount of points scored in that game, and there wasn't. But Patterson still had, 7 carries, 20 yards, and 6 catches for 82. If you play in any leagues that reward receptions, that's absolutely worth having on your roster. You can see that he is fairly rostered in the majority of leagues. He's, we look at that 65% threshold, so he's right up against it. But you know what? If you play in those 8 or 10 team leagues, he's probably more readily available. So take a look and see if he's out there. Definitely a guy worth having on your roster for sure.
Yeah, because this isn't changing. I mean,
no,
he's their RB1 and wide receiver, 2 or 3 at this point.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Strange times they are. All right, who's number 2 for us?
Zach Moss gets the nod after scoring a couple of times last week. He followed it up with a solid game today. Nothing exceptional, but he looks like he's wrestling away that role from Devin Singletary, who looked like he had it early in the season. And he's their short yardage and he's their goal line back. And Buffalo's moving the football and going to get into the red zone, into the scoring positions more often than not. So he should be rostered. Again, another guy that's fairly well rostered, but again, could be available in your league. So I would recommend taking a look, seeing if you can add him this week.
Yeah, this was a guy coming into the season a lot of folks were seeing as kind of a sleeper running back. And the first couple of weeks obviously didn't do him any favors because there was that kind of weird week 1 where we weren't sure if he was a healthy scratch or not healthy.
Yeah.
Or, then last week things were still a little down for him, but looks as though he's finally starting to settle into whatever his role is going to be in this offense. And of the 2 running backs, if this week's any indication, he's the most playable of these 2 running backs again.
I think so.
Kind of what we thought.
I think
All
so.
right. So number 1 on the list is
Chuba Hubbard.
All right.
Yeah, it's opportunity based, right? Like, I don't think Chuba looked anything world beating on Thursday night. He did I think he had about 4 yards per carry, but this is all about opportunity. And unfortunately, Christian McCaffrey suffered a hamstring injury. It's going to keep him out at least a week, and I would guess that probably keeps him out 2 to 3. We'll see. That's just based on things that you read from these fantasy doctors you find online. I don't know if there's any validity to that or not, but I'm certainly not going to put a timeline on his injury, but I'd say he's out at least a week. And Chuba's in line for 18 to 20 touches in that backfield. And that's another offense that's moving the ball and playing pretty good. So I think purely based on opportunity, Chuba Hubbard's your top ad off of the waiver wire this week.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic because Carolina's got that extremely strong defense, but the awful offensive line.
Totally.
So, definitely a guy that I could see being a kind of back-end RB1 some weeks, all the way down to back-end RB2, depending on the way the game scripts and the type of teams that they're facing over the next couple of weeks. Yeah. It's something that, he's a very playable running back with McCaffrey out, but he's also one of those where you have to temper expectations because there is some very clear deficiencies in that Carolina offense. So that's it, folks. That's our top 12 for the week. Let us know in the comments below. What do you think? We're changing the format up, always trying to make things better. So we gave you the percentages owned from what we see on all the major platforms. If you need anything, though, as always, find us on Discord. Find us over on Twitter. You can see our handles here. Our Facebook community is growing each and every day. And it's because of awesome people like you. So make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things we normally tell you to do when you see our beautiful faces. And we will see you Tuesday night for the Dynasty Heat Seekers. See you.
Peace.